Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Fresh discussion today on the future of Max Verstappen in the sport. Toto Wolff at Mercedes has made it no secret his plan is to bring Verstappen to the Silver Arrows over the next couple of seasons. That seemed unlikely until rather recently. Mercedes have turned their form around. The general feeling in the paddock is that they may be leading the way again in 2026, and Verstappen's comment on the 2026 regulations do not necessarily paint the picture the Red Bull are still on top of their game. What does this mean for those two respective parties? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Le Mans, of course, is going on right about now. Verstappen even says that certain teams have talked to him and said, hey Max, do you want to come and drive Le Mans for us at some point in the future? And well, he says, yeah, obviously he'll be down. He's made it quite clear as well that he might not even, I don't think he will at this point to be honest, ride out his Red Bull contract until 2028. Let's say he does, and at that point he decides, all right, might want to go do something else. Le Mans, he's absolutely mentioned as a possibility to go and drive. He even mentioned this to Yuki and said, maybe I need you as my teammate because, you know, you're so light, you'll be flying in the car. There's been lots of talk about, you know, Max and Fernando, right, Alonso potentially driving Le Mans together. Of course, not happening this year. He does have his concerns, Max, I think for good reason actually, about the WEC in general, what he would want to change in WEC and Le Mans to actually make it more viable for him to drive. The balance of performance, of course, is a very controversial factor in that sport right now. Talking about the driver weight as well. A couple of things he would like to change before he drives Le Mans. I think he certainly will at one point. Before we get back to the Verstappen discussion, though, lots of talk on the driver market. Bottas is in a bit of a predicament, really, because Sainz is probably going to Williams, and if he doesn't, he's going to Audi. My feeling is that, okay, that's still Sauber, right, for one more season. Wherever Sainz doesn't go, Bottas probably goes to the alternative. Like, I believe if Sainz goes to Audi Sauber, which I don't think he will, but if he does, I think Williams might well sign Bottas. That would be my expectation at least. But if Sainz does go to Williams, which I think is probably the more likely of the options right now, it would be a Sainz-Albon pairing next season. Sargent may be gone mid-year for Antonelli, as we'll discuss more in the coming minutes what that might mean for Mercedes, because we're pretty sure Antonelli gets that Mercedes drive next year. But if Verstappen was to suddenly jump ship, then it changes the whole balance in the conversation. And this is probably why, in some respects, Mercedes haven't taken their decision quite yet. There was also talk, you know, could Bottas come back to Merc for a year to kind of be the handover for Antonelli to potentially get that drive? I'm not sure that makes much sense for either party, and, well, that's not what they're going to do, it seems. Jack Doohan, Formula 2 driver for Alpine, he talks about potentially getting onto the grid. Definitely he's a possibility. I don't know if I would do it personally, but he's absolutely in the conversation, and given that Behrman's getting a drive and Antonelli's getting a drive, it seems, I think Doohan will feel like he probably should be getting a drive at Alpine next season. Whether he will, who knows. The same story for Liam Lawson, for example. For Team RB, Ricciardo's actually mentioned, though, over the last couple of days that he feels like his schedule, the fact that he's being used as a pay pig, basically, whatever you want to say, for the RB team. We know that, obviously, on their side, it's about the marketing, it's about the sponsorship, and Ricciardo brings rather a lot of that in. So they've got him doing everything, you know, every sort of media commitment, every sort of sponsorship obligation. They're selling it on Danny Rick's shoulders, and therefore he's sitting there thinking, you know what, I'm doing so much of this stuff, it's probably detracting to some degree from his actual performances. And yeah, he says that after Monaco, he had a discussion about the team with it, and they've kind of said, all right, you know what, you might be onto something here. Let's calm it down a bit so you can focus on the racing. And to be fair, he had a much better outing in Montreal than, well, he has done in general so far this season. Toto Wolff as well has said that Sainz deserves a top seat, but it's not going to be the Mercedes seat. Effectively, what Mercedes said is Sainz needs to have something sorted out relatively soon. He's not going to want to wait forever. Whereas Mercedes, they have some degree of luxury in the fact that Antonelli is a signed driver to Mercedes. They're not going to lose him somewhere else. They can wait as long as they like Mercedes to confirm Antonelli as their driver for next season, replacing Hamilton, and I still think they probably will. Sainz can't wait forever. He needs to secure a drive. And also, Mercedes would, I think what Mercedes said to Sainz was, you know, we can give you a one-year deal, probably, and have a bit of a holdout until Antonelli comes in, but that's all we're going to do. And I think for Sainz's point of view, does that make sense? Or does it make more sense just not to sign a one-year deal so we can go somewhere else and actually build a bit of a more stable team environment? I don't know. I think for both parties, this is probably the right call, but it just means that Sainz is running out of options and fast, as we've seen over the last few weeks, of course, after the Perez extension, which came to me as something of a surprise. At least it would have have come to me as a surprise, let's say 8 or so months ago, when he was having absolute shockers. RB as well admitted that other teams will likely try and steal Tsunoda away from them in 2025. The thing is that RB's car is pretty good. There's nowhere that Yuki can really go that is guaranteed to be a better position. I think in 2026 it's going to be interesting because Aston Martin will have their new wind tunnel, they'll have their new factory underway, they'll have their Honda Works partnership. Like, Aston should be a real team to watch and a real threat in 2026, and that Yuki-Honda relationship may mean something there, but in the short term there isn't anywhere that makes more sense for Yuki. But let's talk about some of these 2026 regulations, right? Because it's expected that Mercedes, at least as it stands, have the most advanced engine project. The cars themselves are causing a lot of controversy. We've seen lots of talk about it from various teams, and publicly all we have is the top level stuff. We have what the cars are going to look like, what they're going to weigh, how they're going to perform, apparently what the technical details are going to be in terms of the length of the car and the size of the tyres and the way the front and the rear wing aerodynamics is going to work, the reduction in the downforce and the drag that they're targeting, all these other things. But the teams have received a draft set of regulations, I mean, I don't know, 70, 80 pages, probably more than that now, whatever they are, saying, okay, this is the legality box for the front wing, this is what you can do here, this thing has to comply with this set. So the teams have the draft version of that, and they've pretty much unanimously said, yeah, this ain't great, and we want to do some things about it. There are concerns about the top speed, with the way that the active aero is going to work, the safety implications, just loads of other things that the race did a video on earlier today describing some of the problems with. There is a general feeling, though, that the engines are going to be massively important in this set of regulations, as they were again back in 2014, the last time we got these major dual changes to both aero and, of course, turbo hybrid at the same time. It's still a turbo hybrid, but it's a dramatically different turbo hybrid with far more of a hybrid part, the battery part, than there was back in 2014 until the present day. Mercedes were making it very clear they're not going to agree to any changes on the engine side. They're very happy with their engine side. Toto's saying, yep, the ship has sailed, we're not going to make any changes to 2026. And even Mercedes were the only team of the 10 to reject an extension to the deadline to basically lock the aerodynamic rules in. The FIA have to get it sorted by the end of this month on the 30th of June. 9 of 10 teams said we're happy to push it to the end of October so that you get more time to actually make the regulations a bit better and fix the problems that we have said. Mercedes saying no, we're not going to do that. We're going to veto that decision. So and as Christian Horner said, there's always one that doesn't want to change. Now, what might this mean? Are Mercedes making a good and compelling argument that, well, if you push it back by a few months, it only means that you're kicking the can down the road? Or is it more likely, which I think it is, Mercedes are pretty damn happy with these set of regulations. They like the engine side. They think they're leading the way on that. The rumour is that it's probably Mercedes and Ferrari that have the most advanced engine projects for 2026. Red Bull are doing their own thing now, no Honda anymore, and they're partnering with Ford. There's some debate on how well that's going to work from, especially the hybrid component of the engine, which is going to be massively important. And on the aero side, the floor is becoming less powerful than it previously was. Some of the issues that Mercedes have struggled with in this set of regulations are getting diminished or eliminated in the next set of regulations. So it shouldn't really be a surprise that Mercedes are not just outwardly saying they're confident, but actually are implying that via their actions. Now, I always do wonder a little bit here, given how gung-ho Toto Wolff has been at trying to secure Verstappen's signature. I mean, he said it outright. Verstappen's their number one target. He's the guy they want in their car. He's the best driver in the sport. He's the man that's making the difference. He's the one that they tried to get Verstappen several years ago, and it was going to be a thing, but, the Hamilton-Rosberg days, it wasn't possible to have a seat, whereas Helmut Marko and Red Bull could offer him a seat at Toro Rosso. The rest, of course, since then is history, and Toto Wolff said, yep, it's a relationship between ourselves and Max that needs to happen at some point, and that there are lots of compelling reasons why it might make sense. The internal struggle and dynamic at Red Bull, the battle between Horner and Marko. We know that Verstappen is very loyal to Marko. We know that Jos Verstappen hates Christian Horner on his statements over the last few months. He feels like the team is going to be in a decline. We've got Zach Brown saying that there's more people, not just Adrian Newey, that are going to walk away from the team over the coming months. You look at the trajectory of Red Bull, the domination they've experienced for the last few years is highly, highly unlikely, I would say, to continue in 2026 and beyond. So therefore, Max has to consider his future. But a couple of months ago, there was no evidence that Mercedes had any idea what they were doing in this era of regulations, and therefore, why would they suddenly solve that in 2026? Their trend seemed, and maybe still is to some degree, on the downwards. Can they rectify it? Do they have the talent internally at Mercedes? Have they lost too many smart people over the last few years, some of which to Red Bull, many of which indeed to Red Bull, to rectify their decline? That is a question, but it's a question that Toto Wolff is trying to answer on the positive side. And I feel like part of the reason why Mercedes are saying, no, we're pretty happy with these regs, we're pretty happy with these aero and engine regs, is that maybe they're trying to tell Max, hey, we're happy with these regulations for a reason, we're going to be the best car again. Verstappen as well isn't really happy with the regulations, and I think for good reason. I mean, we just saw there the weight of the cars over the last several years. It's proposed we are going to get a 30 kilogram reduction in weight in 2026. The problem with this is that the engines, I think, are already going to be 30 kilos heavier because there's just more batteries involved. So you've got to lose that weight, and then you've got to lose another 30. And Alonso said that it's just not going to happen. Like, he just doesn't think it's possible. And even McLaren have said that these regulations are far from being able to achieve the agreed objectives and intent that they have. So there are lots of concerns about these regulations. Max says that he wants the cars to be at least 100 kg lighter, if not more than that, if they're going to be more agile, more fun, and better to drive. So clearly there are concerns that Max has with the regulations. And also he says the following: people can hit the regulations well and have a big advantage on the engine. It's something that we don't know at the moment, but some people will probably feel more confident about than others. And I think if you read between the lines there a little bit, there definitely is a feeling that Mercedes especially, and potentially others such as Ferrari, are more confident on their engine projects than Alpine are, for example, than Red Bull seem to be, than Audi seem to be. Of course, there's Honda as well. Who really knows what's going on there? I'm sure they'll be confident about the package they can put together. But there is a reasonable world where the Red Bull engine package is, fourth or fifth best come 2026, which is probably not going to be good enough to win the championship. So this is when the debate is therefore raised, especially when it comes down to who's going to nail these next set of regulations and what does that mean for Max Verstappen, especially now that over the last 2 or 3 rounds, Mercedes have started to get to grips with these cars. In Imola, it was already clear they'd made a more stable car. Monaco, they beat Max. They probably, let's be honest, should have had both cars beating Max. They didn't tell Hamilton not to push on the outlap, and it's been some craziness at Mercedes over the last few rounds in terms of their operational decisions, shall we say, certainly on the Hamilton side of the garage. But maybe they should have had both cars beating Red Bull at that race. They did not, but Russell still out-qualified and outscored Max during the Grand Prix. And then even most recently, Russell was on pole ahead of Max. Okay, same time, Max wins the race. Couple of mistakes from Russell during the course of the Grand Prix, but nonetheless, the Mercedes was right there, and there was even talk on the Friday that their pace in practice, and I think on the Saturday actually, but anyway, the pace in practice from the Mercedes over the last couple of races has been on par with, if not faster, than the other fastest cars on track. So what does that mean for this potential move? Toto is still going to try and make it happen. I think there is a world where Verstappen joins Mercedes in certainly 2027. It's very, very possible, especially because you've got to understand, if Marco leaves Red Bull, we believe there's a contract that simply allows Verstappen to walk away. So if Verstappen ever wants to leave, Marco said he's not going to stand in Max's way. He will step aside and allow that contract clause to come into effect, which allows Max to therefore leave. I think 27, it's absolutely possible. 26 is possible as well, although maybe quite unlikely to change in year 1 of the new regulations. Next year is... we can't entirely rule it out yet. I think this is why Mercedes have not confirmed Antonelli yet, because why would they? And it's even been mentioned by other sources that effectively Toto Wolff is holding out for Max Verstappen. If he can somehow convince Max to join Mercedes, then obviously he's going to do it. And when the time comes that he probably hasn't convinced Max to leave Red Bull, which is the far more likely option of the options. I mean, Max is still winning everything in that car. And of course, if you were to leave Red Bull now and go to Merc next season, you're quite possibly giving up a championship in the Red Bull that's probably still going to have overall the best package next season. The Max will almost certainly win the World Championship with for the 5th time at that point. But maybe you want to look at the future and you say, well, if I'm at Red Bull in 2025, does that put me on the back foot into 2026? Especially because Newey is probably going to be at Ferrari. Even Gerhard Berger says if Newey goes to Mercedes, Verstappen will be there in no time at all. The feeling is that Max is very keen to continue driving Newey designed cars, and maybe that's true. I don't really buy this idea fully, and also I just don't think that Newey's going to Mercedes. I think that if he's going to go anywhere, it's going to be to Ferrari, and there's no seat available for Verstappen there for at least the next couple of seasons. So that's my feeling on why the Antonelli thing isn't confirmed, because, I mean, there is no other explanation for why they wouldn't have confirmed Antonelli yet. They're not considering Ocon, they're not considering Sainz, obviously they've got rid of him from the conversation. The only man that Toto has mentioned is Antonelli, or, obviously, Max Verstappen, but they're not yet confirming Antonelli into the team, even though he may well be in Formula 1 in the next couple of races, really, if Williams put him in, now that he's allowed to drive at 17 years of age. Still on Antonelli, I saw so much conversation on social media yesterday, the fact that, effectively, the FIA have changed the rules for this kid, right, who's not exactly been setting the world on fire in Formula 2, and people are saying, oh, well, you know, Logan Sargent's got the drive, although he was having an underwhelming season in F2, and, like, I think these comparisons don't quite tell the full story, right? Antonelli has basically dominated every championship that he's raced in up until this point. Yes, his F2 campaign hasn't got off to a flying start, but in every session that he does testing Formula 1 cars, he blows the minds of the engineers, according to sources. That's not true with guys like Sargent. That's not true with guys like Frederick Vesti. Like, there's a reason why they think this guy is the truth. And if he isn't, then it is what it is, and they move on, or they try and find someone else in their junior program. But I'm just surprised by so many people preying on Antonelli's downfall on social media and saying that, like, if he comes in at 17 or whatever, then it's gonna completely ruin his career. Like, I just don't see it that way. And, you know, there's more to, you've got to look at the full picture when it comes to stuff like this. Look, do I think Antonelli's the next Verstappen? I mean, it's unlikely. I mean, how often does a Verstappen come along? Not very often. But Mercedes have reason to think that. But obviously, if you can put what they seem as the next Verstappen in the car, or if you can put the real Verstappen in the car, like, as it stands, there's only one option out of the two. Just to close the video out, thought this is interesting. During the Montreal Grand Prix, Max Verstappen was asked the question on his top Formula 1 drivers, or top 5 Formula 1 drivers ever in no order. So, you know, this is his list of 5. There's a couple of names that you kind of, like, you can't not put in the top 5. Like, Schumacher and Hamilton have to be their 7-time world champions. Outside of that, where do we go? Ayrton Senna, I think, for everyone is going to be in there. I do think that, like, in terms of Senna's career, I am one of the people who believes that in comparison to Senna, Alain Prost was severely underrated, and still is, actually, in terms of what he achieved. So, you know, I'm almost inclined to say that if Senna's here, Prost should be almost like right there with him. But like, top 5 F1 drivers ever is so difficult, isn't it? But I think from the respective eras, basically every Formula 1 driver will probably tell you, Fangio, of course, the first GOAT or whatever from back in the day, you kind of can't not talk about Fangio. It's always really difficult to compare the different eras, but I feel like you've got to give some homage to Fangio and what he achieved. So, you know, I think Fangio, Senna, Schumacher, Hamilton, from those respective eras, those are the 4 drivers that are often going to get mentioned. The 5th driver is a matter for debate. You can put Prost in there. You can put Vettel in there, possibly. You can maybe put, like, Jackie Stewart in there. I'd love to put, like, Jim Clark in there, but, you know, maybe, unfortunately, because he passed away, maybe he didn't compete for long enough to make that viable. I think Verstappen's pick on Alonso is actually quite, you know, quite telling on their relationship with what he rates Alonso as, and there's definitely an alternate timeline where Alonso wins far more championships than he has done, and also there's also a compelling argument you can make today to put Verstappen in the top 5 himself. You know, he's already at 60 Grand Prix victories, right? And he's about to be a 4-time world champion. So, you know, I think there's always a compelling argument to make on that one as well. So intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. It's a discussion that comes around every so often, so I thought at least I'd mention it. But hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.